The assistant manager counted my tips out on the Formica counter at 11:42 at night, and I watched the singles flatten under his thumb the way I had watched 1,000 singles flatten under 1,000 thumbs. 14 ones, 3 quarters, $14.75, no, $14.30, because 2 of the quarters were nickels, and I did not have the heart to correct him. The fluorescent overhead at the Carrick Diner buzzed the way it always buzzed at the end of second shift, and the booths behind me were already wiped down for the morning crew, the red vinyl shining the way only red vinyl shines under bad light. "Tessa," he said. He said my name the way men say the name of a woman they are about to disappoint. "Listen. Corporate sent the new schedule. They're cutting hours all the way down the line." I folded the singles in half and put them in the front pocket of my apron. I did not say anything. "You're losing the Tuesday and Thursday lunch shift," he said. "Effective next week." I tried to push back. "I want you to know I tried." "I know you tried, Roy." "I'm sorry." "It's all right." "It's not all right." "No," I said. "But saying it isn't all right doesn't change anything, does it?" He looked at me for a long second the way a man looks at a thing he cannot fix, and would fix if he could, and then he untied his own apron and turned back toward the kitchen. I stood at the counter and listened to the dishwasher run its last cycle of the night, and then I picked up the small cream-colored paper grocery bag of takeaway food the morning cook always set aside for me, and I walked out the front door of the diner past the neon sign that had been buzzing since I was a child and out into the parking lot. The dumpster sat at the far edge of the lot the way it always sat. My 2008 Hyundai Accent sat sideways behind it the way it had sat for 9 nights. The backseat windows fogged from inside the way they always fogged when there was a small body breathing inside the car. I walked across the cracked concrete with the singles still folded in my apron pocket and the paper bag in my right hand, and I did not slam the driver's door. I never slammed the driver's door. I climbed into the back seat the way I had climbed into the back seat for 9 nights, and I pulled the door shut behind me with both hands so the latch clicked and did not bang. Junie was asleep across the back seat under the thin gray wool blanket I had bought at the Goodwill on Brownsville Road in 2021. Her 2 French braids were a little loose at the ends. Her cheek was pressed against the seatbelt buckle, and a faint red line ran across her freckles where the buckle had been pressing for an hour. I lifted her head into my lap as gently as a person can lift a thing that is the only thing she has, and I sat there in the back seat of a 2008 Hyundai Accent behind a dumpster, behind a diner in Carrick, Pennsylvania. And I counted the singles again under the sodium vapor parking lot light. 14 and 30 cents. I had counted right. I did not cry. I had not cried in 9 days, and I was not going to start now. Crying makes a 6-year-old wake up and ask questions, and I had run out of answers sometime around the 3rd night. Junie made a small sleeping sound and turned her face into the canvas of my barn jacket, and I put my hand on the back of her small skull the way you put your hand on a thing that is the only warm thing left in the world. I sat that way for a long time. The dishwasher in the diner finished its cycle. The neon sign clicked off. The parking lot went very quiet. "Mama," Junie said, without opening her eyes. "Yes, baby." "Did you bring the chicken?" "I brought the chicken." "And the biscuit." "And the biscuit." "Okay," she said, and she went back to sleep. I unwrapped the chicken and the biscuit on a square of waxed paper on my knee, ate 2 pieces of biscuit, and left the rest for her breakfast. I sat there for what must have been another half hour with my hand on her braids and my back against the back seat door. After a while, Junie stirred again. "Mama." "Yes, baby. Are you sad?" "A little, baby." "Why?" "Because I'm tired." "Did Roy say something mean?" "No, baby. Roy's a kind man. He is having a hard time, too." "Oh, you go back to sleep?" "Mama?" "Yes." "Tell me about Mrs. Hennig's cats." "Smokey and Pip?" "Tell me what they did." "Smokey liked to sit on top of the radiator. Pip liked to chew the corners of the cardboard box that you had your crayons in. Pip was bad." "Pip was a kitten, baby." Pip was naughty. All right. Pip was a little naughty. Mama. Yes, baby. Was I a kitten? You were the best kitten. I love you, Mama. I love you, Junie. She fell asleep again, with the words still in the air, and I sat in the back seat and I listened to the parking lot, and I tried to think about something that was not the $14.30 in the front pocket of my apron. I tried to think about the daycare on Brownsville Road where I had been a preschool teacher for 6 years before the church board closed it in May of 2023. I had been there since I was 26. The day they closed, the assistant pastor came into my classroom with a folded letter in his hand. "Tessa," he had said, "we love what you've built here, but the building is going in another direction." "I understand, Pastor." "You'll have a month." "Thank you, Pastor." "I'm sorry." "It's all right." "It is not all right, Tessa." "No," I had said. But there is no other thing to say. I had cleaned out my classroom that night with Junie on the carpet, sorting felt animals into a cardboard box. The diner had taken me on the next week because the day cook's wife had been one of my mothers at the daycare. The day cook had said to the assistant manager, "Roy, this woman knows how to show up on time," and Roy had hired me without an interview. That was the night the diner cut my hours. That was the Friday. The post office on Brownsville Road did not open until 9 on a Saturday. I drove the 3 blocks to the church parking lot off Wilmot Street where the security guard had told me twice already he did not see anyone, and I parked under the maple tree at the back, and I climbed back into the back seat with my daughter, and we slept the way you sleep in a car after 9 days, which is not really sleep at all, only a kind of waiting for the next light. When the next light came, it came up gray through the maple leaves. Junie sat up beside me in the back seat and rubbed her eyes with both fists. "Mama, what day is it?" "Saturday, baby." "Is the diner today?" "Yes, baby. Breakfast shift?" "Can I have the donut?" "Yes, baby." "With the sprinkles?" "With the sprinkles." "Okay." I sat up and folded the blanket and washed my face in the gas station bathroom on Brownsville Road, with the door propped open by Junie's small white sneaker, and I bought a coffee for $1 and a donut with sprinkles for $1.50 for Junie, and I drove the 4 miles back to the diner for the Saturday breakfast shift, which I still had, for now, for 1 more week. 3 days passed. 3 days of the same shift, and the same parking lot, and the same maple tree, and the same $14 tip. On Saturday morning in the gas station bathroom, Junie asked, "Mama, are we going to live in our apartment again?" "I don't know yet, baby." Mrs. Hennig had 2 cats. "Yes, baby. Smokey and Pip." "Are Smokey and Pip in our apartment now?" "No, baby. Mrs. Hennig moved upstairs with her sister." "Oh." She brushed her teeth with the small pink toothbrush I kept in the glove compartment. On Sunday afternoon, between shifts, I drove her to the Carnegie Library branch on Brentwood Boulevard. The librarian, Mrs. Pulaski, set a small paper cup of water down on the table beside Junie. "Mrs. Pulaski, Tessa, honey. Thank you for the water. It's only water, hun." "It is not only water, ma'am." "Tessa." "Yes?" "Are you all right?" "I am working on it, ma'am. You let me know if I can help." "Yes, ma'am." She went back to the desk, and she did not ask another question that day. On Monday night, Lou Whitaker, the day cook's wife, came out into the parking lot at the end of the dinner shift with a Tupperware container. "Tessa? Lou, I'm not asking. You don't owe me a thing. You take this for your girl." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker." "Don't you Mrs. Whitaker me, hun. You've called me Lou for 3 years." "Thank you, Lou. Eat the potatoes first. They don't keep." "Yes, Lou." She walked back into the diner without looking at me again. On Tuesday morning, before the lunch shift, I drove to the Quarrick Branch post office because I had been picking up my mail, their general delivery, since the eviction, and I parked the Hyundai at the curb under the bare-limbed sycamores, and I walked into the brick 1920s building with Junie's hand in mine. The clerk's name was Bonnie. She had been the clerk for as long as I had been collecting mail there, which was 9 days, which was longer than it sounded. "Marlowe," I said. "Tessa Marlowe." Bonnie went into the back. She came out with one envelope. It was thick. It was cream cardstock, heavy cream cardstock, the kind you do not see in a Carrick post office, the kind that costs more for the envelope than the contents of most envelopes. And there was a navy wax seal pressed into the back flap with the impression of a small anchor. The return address was Charleston, South Carolina. The name on the return address was a notary's name. Augustus J. Beaumont, Esquire, Attorney and Notary Public, East Bay Street. "That's a heavy one, hun," Bonnie said. "Yes." "You know anybody in Charleston?" "No," I said. "I don't know anybody in Charleston." Bonnie said. I did not open the envelope at the post office counter. I did not open it on the sidewalk under the sycamores. I held it against my breastbone with one hand, and I held Junie's small hand with the other, and I walked her back to the Hyundai, and I buckled her into the front seat because the back seat was full of blankets, and I set the envelope flat on the dash, and I drove. I drove south on Brownsville Road, and then west on Carson, and then I crossed the Birmingham Bridge and turned north along the Allegheny, and I kept driving until the road became a thin gravel track between the river and the trees, and the city was behind us, and I pulled the Hyundai over onto a flat strip of dirt under a sycamore tree at the riverbank, and I cut the engine. "Where are we, Mama?" "At the river, baby." "Why?" "Because we're going to look at the river for a few minutes." "Are we going to skip the lunch shift?" "Maybe, baby." "Will you get in trouble?" "A little. It's all right." "Is it because of the letter?" "Yes, baby, because of the letter." "Is the letter important?" "I don't know yet, baby. That's what I have to find out." "Okay." "Hold my hand on the bank, baby. The dirt is loose." "Okay." I lifted her out of the front seat, and I carried her on my hip the way I carried her when she was 3, because she did not weigh much more at 6 than she had weighed at 3, and I walked her down the small bank to the flat gray limestone slab at the edge of the water. The river was the color of old slate. A heron was standing on a half-submerged log 40 feet out and did not turn its head when we sat down. "Mama?" "Yes, baby?" "Look at the bird." "That's a heron, baby." "It's standing on one leg. They do that when they fish." "Is it fishing?" "Yes, baby." "Has it caught one?" "Not yet." "I'll wait with it." "All right, baby." I sat cross-legged on the slab. Junie climbed into my lap. I held the cream cardstock envelope in both hands for a long minute, and I looked across the river to the bare trees on the far bank, and I made sure I was the only adult on the river that morning. Then I broke the navy wax seal with my thumb. Inside there were 3 documents. The top one was a handwritten letter on heavy cream paper. The handwriting was old-school cursive, the kind of cursive that comes out of a black gentleman of 70 who learned penmanship at a Charleston grammar school in 1963. The ink was blue, fountain pen blue. "Dear Ms. Marlowe," it began, "my name is Augustus J. Beaumont. I am an attorney and notary public in the city of Charleston, South Carolina, and I've practiced before the bar of this state for 38 years. I'm writing to you because I was retained 11 months ago by your great-uncle, Mr. Theodore Marlowe of East Bay Street, Charleston, to find his only living blood relative in the country. My investigator located you in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in October. Mr. Theodore Marlowe died of a sudden heart attack on the morning of November the 2nd, 6 weeks after retaining me, before he could write to you himself. Your great-uncle was the youngest brother of your late grandmother, Beatrice Marlowe of Etna, Pennsylvania. He left Etna for South Carolina in the spring of 1962 at the age of 19, after a family rupture the particulars of which I do not know and which he did not tell me. He never returned to Pennsylvania. He never married. He had no children. He owned and operated a small Charleston shrimping fleet for 41 years, before selling it in 2018 for the net sum of $4,600,000. He kept his costs low. He lived in the same 1898 single house on East Bay Street for the entire 41 years. In December of 2024, he came into my office with a small worn leather portfolio and asked me to find you. He said he had been thinking about his sister and her granddaughter, and he wished, before he died, to leave the Charleston house and the remainder of the fleet sale proceeds to his sister's only blood descendant. He asked, in particular, that the house be a quiet place for the child, for your daughter, to grow. Enclosed, you will find a copy of the trust instrument. The trust names you, Tessa Marlowe, as sole beneficiary of the Charleston single house at the address above, and of the remaining trust, corpus of $3,100,000 after taxes, and after a small annual stipend to a marine conservation nonprofit selected by your great-uncle. There are no other conditions of consequence. If you will travel to Charleston at your earliest convenience, I will execute the trust and convey the property and the funds. I will pay your travel costs out of the trust. The house has been kept quiet and clean since November. There is a kitchen, 3 bedrooms upstairs, a small walled garden, and a porch the people here call a piazza. It catches the late sun. Your great-uncle Theodore asks that I tell you he is sorry for the silence, and he hopes the house will be a quiet place for your daughter to grow. Yours faithfully, Augustus J. Beaumont, Esquire. I read the letter through one time without breathing. Then I read it through a second time. Then I held it against my collarbone the way I had held the envelope against my collarbone in the post office, and I looked across the river at the heron on the log. "Mama," Junie said. "Yes, baby." "Is that a sad letter or a happy letter?" I tried to answer her. I could not, for a moment, get the sound up out of my throat. "I don't know yet, baby." "Is it a long letter?" "It's a long letter." "Who is it from?" "It's from a man in a place called Charleston." "Where is Charleston?" "It's far away. Down south by the sea." "Have you been there?" "No, baby, I've never been there." "Has he been here?" "No, baby, he's never been here." "Then how does he know your name?" "That's a good question, baby. He had to look very hard for me." "Why did he look for you?" "Because he is doing a kindness for somebody." "For who?" "For somebody who is not here anymore." "Like Grandma?" "Like Grandma." "Oh." She was quiet for a long minute. Then she said, "Mama, are we still sleeping in the car tonight?" "Yes, baby." "Okay," Junie said. She put her small, mittened hand on my knee, and she leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat on the limestone slab in the dawn-pink light at the edge of the Allegheny River while the heron stood on its log. If this story is finding you tonight, take a moment to press the like button below. It helps these stories find the mothers who need them. The heron lifted off the log and flew downstream. Junie fell asleep against my shoulder. I read the letter a third time, and a fourth. Then I read the trust instrument behind it. A house on East Bay Street. $3,100,000 at a Charleston bank. An annual stipend of $40,000 to a marine conservation nonprofit named the Low Country Estuary Trust. A 3-year clause on the principal of the house. The third document was a photocopy of a 1962 sepia photograph. A 19-year-old boy stood on a wooden porch with a small, worn leather portfolio in his hand, in a white linen short-sleeve shirt over dark wool trousers and black leather lace-up shoes. He was lean and wiry. His dark hair was brushed back. He was not smiling. He had my mother's mouth. I had never seen him before in my life. I sat on the limestone slab and I looked at the photograph for a long time. Once, when I was 9, my grandmother Beatrice had been folding sheets in the kitchen on a Sunday afternoon in Etna, and I had asked her, "Grandma, do you have any brothers?" "One," she had said, "once." "Where is he?" "He went south, Tess. He went south as a boy, and he never came back." "Why?" "We don't speak of him, Tess." "Why, Grandma?" "Because we don't, child." "Was he bad?" "No, he wasn't bad." "Then why?" "Because grown people make mistakes, Tess, and then they don't know how to undo them. And then they get old. And then it is too late." "Oh. Don't ask me about him again, child." "Yes, Grandma." She had not spoken of him again in the 18 years I had known her after that day. Then I lifted Junie carefully, and I carried her back up the bank to the Hyundai. And I buckled her into the front seat, and I drove back to the diner, and I worked the lunch shift, and I worked the dinner shift. And at 11 o'clock that night in the back seat of the Hyundai, under the maple tree at the church on Wilmot Street, I called the number on the bottom of the cream cardstock letter from the burner phone. I kept charged off the cigarette lighter. A woman with a soft Charleston voice answered on the second ring. "Beaumont and Wilcox," she said. "How may I direct your call?" "My name is Tessa Marlowe." There was a small pause. "Ms. Marlowe," the woman said, and her voice changed. It went a quarter step softer. "Mr. Beaumont has been hoping to hear from you. May I put him on the line?" "Yes." The line clicked. "Ms. Marlowe." The voice on the other end of the line was the voice of an elderly black gentleman of careful diction. There was no hurry in it. There was only the kind of attention a man gives to a single thing he has been waiting on for 11 months. "Mr. Beaumont, did you receive the envelope?" "Yes, sir." "And did you read the letter?" "4 times." "I am very glad." "Sir," I said, "is this real?" There was a small quiet on the other end of the line. "Yes, Miss Marlowe," he said. "It is real. Every word of it is real. I executed the trust myself in November after your great-uncle's funeral, and I have been holding the corpus in escrow at First Citizens Bank on Broad Street since the 3rd of December. The house at the address on the letter has been cleaned and kept quiet since the day after the funeral. There is a key in my desk that has your name on it. Sir, I have a 6-year-old daughter. I know, Miss Marlowe, the investigator's report mentioned her by name. Her name is Juniper." I did not say anything. "Miss Marlowe?" "Yes, sir." "Are you presently in safe lodging?" I looked through the windshield at the maple tree at the back of the church parking lot off Wilmot Street, and I looked at my 6-year-old daughter asleep in the back seat under the thin gray wool blanket, and I did not lie to a man who had taken 11 months of his life to find me. "No, sir," I said. There was a small quiet on the other end of the line again. "Miss Marlowe," Mr. Beaumont said, "I will wire you $1,000 in the morning out of the trust travel allowance, and I will hold a hotel room for you and your daughter at the Mills House on Meeting Street for as many nights as you require beginning Friday evening. The trust will pay your travel. I would be glad to see you in my office on Monday morning at any hour you choose. Please drive at your own pace. The matter has waited 11 months. It can wait another week." "Sir," I said. My voice came out very thin. "Why did he write me?" "Ma'am," Mr. Beaumont said, "I cannot tell you why he kept his silence for 62 years. I can only tell you that in the last year of his life he came into my office and he sat in the chair across from me with that small worn leather portfolio in his lap, and he told me he had a great niece in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the granddaughter of the sister he had not spoken to in 60 years, and he told me he believed she had a small daughter, and he wished to leave the house and the money to her so the child would have a quiet place to grow. He paid my standard fee. He retained my investigator. He died 6 weeks later. I've spent 11 months trying to find you, Miss Marlowe. I am very glad I have." I sat in the back seat of the Hyundai, and I held the burner phone against my ear, and I looked at the back of my daughter's head under the gray wool blanket. "Thank you, Mr. Beaumont." "There's no need to thank me, ma'am." "There is, sir. Ma'am, I was paid for my work. I was paid 11 months ago by a kind old man with a small, worn leather portfolio. I've only done what I was retained to do." "Sir, you wrote the letter in your own hand." "Yes, ma'am." "You did not have to." "No, ma'am, I did not." "Why did you?" There was a small pause on the other end of the line. "Because, Miss Marlowe, the standard form is for a stranger, and after 11 months of looking for you, you were not a stranger to me. May I see you Monday?" "Yes, sir, Monday." "Drive safely, ma'am." "I will, sir." "Miss Marlowe." "Yes." Tell the child a kind old gentleman in Charleston is glad to know her name. I will, sir. I drove south on Friday morning. The Hyundai had 231,000 miles on it and a soft tick in the timing belt, and the wire transfer had cleared at 8 a.m. exactly the way Mr. Beaumont had said it would, and I had filled the tank at the Sheets on Brownsville Road and bought Junie a juice box and a peanut butter sandwich and a small stuffed rabbit at the Walmart on Route 51, because she had asked for the rabbit twice on the way to the Walmart, and I had not had the dollars to buy her the rabbit on either of the 2 previous Saturdays she had asked, and on this Saturday I had the dollars. It took us 2 days. We drove south through West Virginia and the Blue Ridge in a slow, gray November rain. Near Wytheville, the timing belt's tick got worse, and I pulled over at a rest stop with both hands on the steering wheel. "Please," I said into the dashboard. "Please, not now." Junie was asleep in the front seat with the stuffed rabbit under her chin. I put my hand on her seatbelt buckle and I waited. After a few minutes, the tick faded. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you." I started the car. I drove on. We crossed into South Carolina at 2 in the afternoon on Friday. The light changed at the state line. It went from gray-white to a low gold, and the trees changed from bare oaks to live oaks hung with Spanish moss, and Junie woke up and looked out the window and said, "Mama, those trees are wearing scarves." And I said, "Yes, baby, those are live oaks." And she said, "I like them." And I said, "I like them too." We slept in the room Mr. Beaumont had held for us at the Mills house on Friday night, and Junie ate a hamburger from room service and stood at the tall window and looked at the gas lamps on Meeting Street for half an hour without speaking. And I lay on the bed and I cried into the pillow for the first time in 9 days, very quietly with my fist against my mouth so the child would not hear me. On Saturday morning we walked out the front door of the Mills house, and we walked across Meeting Street to the small park at the corner with the live oak in the center, and the wrought iron benches. And Junie stood under the live oak with her chin tipped up, and she looked into the canopy for a long time without saying anything. "Mama." "Yes, baby." "Are the trees in Charleston always like this?" "Yes, baby, they are. I would like to go to school here." I sat down on the wrought iron bench. I put my hand over my mouth. I did not say anything for a moment. "All right, baby." "All right," Junie said. We bought a box of saltines and a small wedge of cheese at a corner store on Broad Street, and we walked along East Bay Street as far as the Battery. And we did not stop in front of the ochre-painted single house on the way because I was not ready to look at the house yet. I would look at the house on Monday. On Saturday, I only wanted to walk along East Bay Street with my daughter and eat saltines on a bench at the seawall and listen to her count the pelicans. She counted 7. On Sunday, I took her to a small Methodist church on Anson Street because I had grown up Methodist and had not been to a service in 2 years, and I sat in the back pew, and I did not sing the hymns because my voice would not come up out of my throat, but Junie sang. She sang the chorus of one of the hymns from her preschool, the one about the small bird in the small tree, and the elderly woman in the pew in front of us turned around at the end of the hymn, and she put her hand on Junie's small head and she said, "Bless you, child." And Junie said, "Thank you, ma'am." And the elderly woman looked at me and she said, "You have raised a polite girl." And I said, "Thank you, ma'am, I am trying." On Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I walked Junie up the brick walk to a 3-story 1850s building at the lower end of East Bay Street with white trim and a polished brass plaque at the door that read, in small black letters, "Beaumont and Wilcox, Attorneys at Law, Notaries Public, Established 1987. I held my daughter's hand in my left hand, and I held the cream cardstock envelope under my right arm, and I rang the bell. The receptionist was a woman in her late 60s named Mrs. Wilcox, who had been Mr. Beaumont's law partner since 1991 and who took one look at the two of us and said, very softly, "Come in, baby, come in. He's been waiting all morning." Mr. Beaumont came out of the inner office on his own feet. He was a tall, lean, upright black gentleman of 71, in a tweed sport coat, buttoned at the chest over a high-necked cream cotton button-down shirt buttoned to the throat with a navy silk tie, ankle-length dark wool slacks pressed to a sharp crease, polished brown leather Oxford shoes, a thin gold pocket watch chain at his waistcoat, and tortoise-shell rectangular glasses on a thin gold chain, and his silver hair was neatly combed, and his small gray mustache was trimmed close. He held out one hand to me, and then he held out the other hand to Junie, very gravely, and Junie shook his hand with both of her hands the way a 6-year-old shakes the hand of a very tall old gentleman. "Miss Marlowe," he said, "Mr. Beaumont, and Miss Juniper." "Hello, sir," Junie said. "It is a great pleasure to make your acquaintance, ma'am." Junie smiled a small private smile that I had not seen on her face in a long time. He showed us into the inner office. The office had tall arched windows, and the soft, warm afternoon Carolina light came through them at a slant, and there was a polished walnut desk in the center of the room, and 3 chairs on the visitor's side, and a small, worn leather portfolio set on the corner of the desk. He sat us down. "Miss Marlowe," he said, "before we begin, I would like to show you something." He opened the small, worn leather portfolio. Inside, there was a 1962 sepia photograph, the same as the photocopy in the envelope. Only this one was the original, the corners soft with age. There was a 2018 framed photograph of a man of 75 in a faded blue and white striped Charleston shrimpers button-down shirt, buttoned at the chest over ankle-length faded dark trousers and brown leather work boots, his silver-gray hair lifting slightly in a sea wind, his face weathered tan and lined and smiling a small, still smile. And there was a single hand-written index card in fountain pen blue ink in an old man's careful hand. The card read, in 7 words, "The house is for the child." I looked at the card for a long time. "He wrote that the morning after he retained me," Mr. Beaumont said quietly. "He asked that I keep it in the file. He said if anything happened to him before I found you, I was to give you the card with the keys." I touched the card with one fingertip. I did not pick it up. "Sir," I said, "did he know about her?" "He knew her name and her age. The investigator's report had a school photograph. He saw her face." "Yes, ma'am." "And then he died. 6 weeks later, in his sleep, on a Tuesday morning, in the chair on the porch of the house on East Bay Street with a cup of coffee on the rail beside him. The cleaning lady found him at 9 a.m. The doctor said he had not suffered. I sat in the visitor's chair with my daughter on my lap and her 2 French braids against my collarbone, and I looked at the small handwritten index card on the polished walnut desk, and I did not cry, because I had cried into the pillow at the Mills house on Friday night, and a person only has so many of those left. Mr. Beaumont waited. He did not hurry me. He sat across the polished walnut desk in the soft, warm, slanted Carolina light, and he watched the small gray clock on the wall behind my left shoulder, and he did not say a word for what must have been 3 full minutes. Then he opened a manila folder. "Miss Marlowe," he said, "these are the papers. I will walk you through each of them slowly. There is no hurry. Any term you do not understand we will read together, and I will explain it. When we have read them all, I will ask you whether you wish to accept the trust as your great-uncle wrote it. There is no shame in any answer. If you wish to take time, we will take time. If you wish to ask a question, we will sit until the question is asked. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Good, we will begin." He read me the trust the way an old man reads a child a story, slowly, in his own voice, every clause out loud with his finger under each line. "Article 1, he said. "The single house at the address on East Bay Street, Charleston, South Carolina, is conveyed in fee simple to the named beneficiary, Tessa Marlowe." "Yes, sir." Article 2. The remaining trust corpus, $3,100,000, is held in trust at First Citizens Bank on Broad Street. "Yes, sir." Article 3. An annual stipend of $40,000 to the Low Country Estuary Trust. "Yes, sir." Article 4. The principal of the house may not be transferred or sold for the first 3 years after execution. "Yes, sir." Article 5. Did you read Article 5 at the river, ma'am? I do not think I did, sir. Article 5 provides that the trust will pay reasonable tuition for the named child, Juniper Marlowe, through the completion of her 4-year undergraduate education at any accredited college or university of her choosing. It is a small clause. He added it the morning after he saw the school photograph. I put my hand over my mouth. I did not say anything. Article 6, he said quietly. The trust will also pay reasonable health care premiums for the beneficiary and the named child for as long as the beneficiary lives. Sir? Yes, ma'am. Sir, I have not had a checkup in 4 years. Then you will see Dr. Patel on King Street next Wednesday at 10, ma'am, on the trust. The appointment is already made. I made it on the 1st of November. I have been making it every 1st of November since. I closed my eyes for a moment. Article 7. Any unspent annual income at the end of the calendar year is to be reinvested in the principal. Yes, sir. He read for 40 minutes. When he was done, he closed the folder and folded his hands on top of it. Miss Marlowe, he said, will you accept the conditions of the trust as it is written? I sat in the visitor's chair with my daughter on my lap. Mr. Beaumont, I said. Yes, ma'am. May I have an hour? You may have any number of hours, Miss Marlowe. 1 will be enough. He stood up. He walked around the polished walnut desk. He went to a small mahogany side door I had not noticed at the back of the office, and he opened it onto a narrow side garden full of palmetto and crepe myrtle and a little brick path that led down toward the harbor. Take whatever time you need, ma'am, he said quietly. The truth has waited 11 months. It can wait another hour. I took my daughter's hand. We walked down the brick path through the side garden and out a small wrought iron gate and along East Bay Street as far as the Battery, and I sat on a green wooden bench at the seawall with my daughter on my lap, and I watched the harbor. The harbor was the color of a slate roof in a winter rain, only blue. A shrimp boat was crossing slowly out toward the channel. 2 pelicans drifted low across the water. The wind off the harbor was the kind of wind that smells of salt and oyster shell, and a thing called pluff mud that I would learn later is what the Low Country calls the rich black harbor mud at low tide. Junie did not say anything. She put her small mittened hand on my knee, the way she had put it on my knee on the limestone slab at the Allegheny. I sat on the bench and I thought about my grandmother Beatrice in the nursing home in Etna in 2019, who had held my hand in the last week of her life, and had said, very softly, with her eyes closed, I had a brother, Tess, I had a younger brother, and I let him go. And I had said, it's all right, Grandma, it's all right, and she had said, it is not all right, but thank you, Tess, thank you for saying it. And she had died 3 days later, and I had gone back to my 1-bedroom in Carrick, and I had not thought about the brother again, because I had not had the room in my life to think about the brother again, until a thick cream cardstock envelope arrived in a Carrick post office on a Tuesday morning in early November. Junie. Yes, Mama? I want to tell you something. Okay. I had a grandma. Her name was Beatrice. Like in the storybook. Yes, baby, like in the storybook. Did I meet her? You met her one time when you were a baby. You wouldn't remember. Was she nice? Yes, baby, she was very nice. She held you on her lap, and she sang you the song about the boat. Which boat? The little boat that crosses the harbor at the end of the day. Did Grandma sing to you, too? Yes, baby, she did. What happened to Grandma? She got very old, baby, and then she got very tired, and then she went to sleep, and she did not wake up. That's sad, Mama. Yes, baby, it is. Was Grandma's brother the man who wrote the letter? Grandma's brother was the man who paid for the letter. The man who wrote the letter is the kind man we just met. Mr. Beaumont. Yes. Mama. Yes, baby. Why did Grandma's brother give us a house? I held her closer for a moment, because he could not give one to Grandma when she was alive, and he was very sorry about that. So he gave one to us instead. Oh, yeah, do you understand, baby? I think so, Mama. It's all right if you don't. Mama. Yes. I think Grandma would be happy. I could not say anything for a long second. Yes, baby. I think she would be happy too. I sat on the bench for 53 minutes. I counted them on my watch. Junie did not ask me a single question. She sat on my lap with her small mittened hand on my knee and she watched the pelicans. And at 52 minutes she said, Mama, the boat is coming back. Yes, baby. Are we going to live in the house? Yes, baby. Okay, Junie said. I stood up. I carried her on my hip back along East Bay Street and through the small wrought iron gate and up the brick path, through the palmettos and the crepe myrtle, and back into the side door of Mr. Beaumont's office. He was sitting at the polished walnut desk, exactly where I had left him. The manila folder was on the desk. The small handwritten index card was on the manila folder. Mr. Beaumont. Yes, ma'am. I will accept the trust. Very well, Miss Marlowe. He took an old fountain pen out of the breast pocket of his tweed sport coat. He uncapped it. He set it on the desk between us. And then he stood up, and he walked around the desk and he laid one of his hands very lightly on the top of Junie's head. Only for a moment, the way an old man lays his hand on a child he has been waiting to meet for 11 months, and he said to her very gently, Welcome to Charleston, Miss Juniper. Thank you, sir, Junie said. I signed the trust. I signed the deed transfer. I signed the brokerage transfer. I signed 11 sheets of paper, and Mr. Beaumont signed each one after me, and Mrs. Wilcox notarized each one with her seal at the bottom of each page, and when we were done, Mr. Beaumont opened a small drawer in the polished walnut desk, and he took out a single brass key on a leather fob with a small paper label that read, in the same fountain pen blue ink as the index card, the address of the house on East Bay Street. He set the key in my hand and he closed my fingers around it. Ma'am, he said, the house is yours. Sir? I said. Yes, Miss Marlowe. Thank you. There is no need, ma'am. There is. He looked at me through the tortoise-shell rectangular glasses on the thin gold chain, and his kind, warm, brown eyes were a little wet at the corners, and he said, He was a good man, Miss Marlowe. I knew him for 41 years. He paid his bills on the first of every month, and he never once raised his voice in my office, and he asked me about my wife every time he came in. He was a good man, and he was sorry for the silence, and he is at rest now. Take the child to the house. I took my daughter to the house. The house was on East Bay Street, 4 blocks down from Mr. Beaumont's office. It was a narrow 3-story ochre-painted stucco single house with dark green shutters and a wrought iron front gate, and a double piazza ran the length of the side facing south, and a little walled garden of palmetto and crepe myrtle sat behind it, and a single-story kitchen house sat at the back of the garden. I stood at the wrought iron gate with the brass key in my hand and the cream cardstock envelope under my arm and my 6-year-old daughter on my hip, and I looked up at the house. Mama. Yes, baby. Is that the house? That's the house. It's pretty. Yes. It looks like a story house. It does, baby. I unlocked the gate. I walked up the brick path. I unlocked the front door. I pushed the door open with my shoulder. The hall inside was narrow and tall and smelled faintly of old beeswax and cedar. The wood floor had been swept. A small mahogany hall table held a brass bowl with a single piece of mail in it, a folded note in fountain pen blue ink in the same careful hand as the index card. I picked it up. It read, Miss Marlowe, there is bread in the bread box, milk in the ice box, a kettle on the stove. The child's room is the small one at the back upstairs with the south-facing window. The bed is made. I had it made up for her on the day after the funeral. A.J. Beaumont. I stood in the narrow tall hall of an 1898 single house on East Bay Street in Charleston, South Carolina, with my 6-year-old daughter on my hip and a brass key in my hand and a folded note from a 71-year-old notary in my fingers, and I cried, at last, very quietly into my daughter's 2 French braids, and I did not stop for a long time. Junie did not ask me any questions. She put her small mittened hand on the back of my neck, the way she had put her hand on my knee at the Allegheny, the way she had put her hand on my knee at the Battery, and she waited. When I stopped crying, I walked her up the narrow staircase to the small bedroom at the back upstairs with the south-facing window, and the bed was made up the way Mr. Beaumont had said, with a soft, pale yellow quilt and 2 clean white pillows, and the late afternoon Carolina sun came in through the window in a slow, warm, slanted bar across the quilt. Junie climbed up onto the bed, and she lay down on her side, and she put her small fist under her cheek, and she said, "Mama." "Yes, baby." "This is a good bed." "Yes, baby, it is." "Are you going to sleep in the room next to me?" "Yes, baby." "Okay," Junie said. She closed her eyes, and she slept the way a child sleeps in a soft bed, with a quilt and a pillow and a south-facing window for the first time in 9 days, which is to say, deeply and without dreams, for 13 hours. I sat on the floor beside the bed with my back against the wall, and I watched her for a long time. I whispered to her once while she slept, "Junie." She did not stir. "Junie, baby." She did not stir. "I am going to do my best. I am going to do my very best." She did not stir. "I am going to be the kind of mother you deserve." She did not stir. "And I am going to remember the kind old man and the kind old gentleman in Charleston for as long as I live." She did not stir. "I love you, Junie." She did not stir, but the corner of her mouth moved, and she sighed once in her sleep. I have been in the house for 1 year now. I teach half-time at an elementary school 3 blocks west of East Bay Street. The principal is a woman named Mrs. Gaillard, who interviewed me on a Wednesday afternoon in February. "Miss Marlowe." "Yes, ma'am." 6 years at the Methodist daycare in Pittsburgh." "Yes, ma'am." "And then the diner." "Yes, ma'am." "What did the diner teach you?" "That a child who is hungry will not learn, ma'am." She had set down her pen. "When can you start?" "Whenever you need me, ma'am." "Monday." "Yes, ma'am." I drive the same 2008 Hyundai Accent I drove south from Pittsburgh. Mr. Beaumont has offered 3 different times to have it replaced out of the trust. "Ma'am, the car has done its work." "Sir, it has. Will you let me arrange a new one?" "No, sir, not yet." "Why?" "Because the car carried us here, sir. It can carry us a little while longer." "Very well, ma'am." Junie started 1st grade in August. Her teacher is a young woman named Miss Caldwell. At the first parent conference in October, Miss Caldwell sat across her small wooden table from me and folded her hands. "Miss Marlowe." "Yes, Miss Caldwell." "Has Juniper had a hard year before this one?" "Yes, ma'am. We had a hard November the year before." "I thought as much." "How did you know?" "She is the kind of child who notices when another child has not eaten her lunch." "Yes." "And she shares her own without being asked." "Yes." "That is not a thing she learned in the last 9 months, Miss Marlowe." "No, ma'am, I think she learned it before that." "From you?" "Maybe, or from a grandmother she does not remember, or from a great-uncle she never met." Miss Caldwell looked at me for a long moment, and she said, "Miss Marlowe, you keep doing what you are doing." "Yes, ma'am." "I see Mr. Beaumont every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. He has tea with us in the kitchen house at the back of the garden. He is 72 now. He asked Junie about her schoolwork." "Miss Juniper?" "Yes, sir." "What did Miss Caldwell teach you this week?" "How to count by 5s, sir." "Will you count for me?" 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. "Beautifully, ma'am." "Thank you, sir." He asks me about the Low Country Estuary Trust, on whose board I now sit as the trust's named representative. He stays for exactly 40 minutes. He leaves at the end of the 40 minutes with his tweed sport coat buttoned at the chest. He has not raised his voice in my house once. In April, he brought a small box of letters down from his office and set it on the kitchen house table. "Ma'am." "Yes, sir." These are the letters your great-uncle wrote to your grandmother between 1962 and 1968. Every one of them came back unopened. He kept them in a tin in the back of that cupboard for 60 years. Sir? They are not for me to read, ma'am. I leave them with you. Yes, sir. He tipped his head and he left. I sat at the table for 2 hours and I did not open the letters either. I am still not ready. They sit on a shelf in the front parlor beside the small, worn leather portfolio. I called Lou Whitaker in Pittsburgh in February. The diner had closed in January. Lou. Tessa, honey, where are you? Charleston, Lou. I'm in Charleston. You're not. I am. Tessa. Lou, I want you to come down in the spring with your granddaughter on me. Honey. Lou, I have not forgotten the Tupperware. Tessa. Will you come? Tessa, I always knew you were going somewhere. Lou, I did not always know it. Hon, I am very glad you got there. She came in March. Junie taught her granddaughter the names of all 7 pelicans on the seawall. The 1962 sepia photograph of my great-uncle Theodore Marlowe at 19 sits in a small dark walnut frame on the mantel in the front parlor. The 2018 photograph of him at 75, in the faded blue and white striped shrimper's shirt, sits beside it. I look at the 2 photographs every morning. I am still learning his face. The small worn leather portfolio sits on the top shelf of the bookcase in the parlor. I do not open it often. When I do, the smell of old leather comes up out of it the way the smell of cedar comes up out of a sea chest, and I sit on the rug for a while, and then I close it, and I put it back. If you have ever counted the change in your tip jar twice, subscribe to Mothers Who Inherit. We tell these stories because some kindnesses travel by post, and some great-uncles spend a year of their life finding the niece they never met. The handwritten index card in the fountain pen blue ink in the old man's careful hand sits in a small dark walnut frame on the kitchen wall above the small wooden child's desk where Junie does her schoolwork after dinner. I had it framed at a small shop on King Street the second week we were in the house. I paid for the framing in cash out of my last Pittsburgh tip money because I wanted the framing to be paid for out of the singles I had counted on a Formica counter at 11:42 on a Friday night, and not out of the trust. The card reads, in 7 words, in an old man's careful hand. The house is for the child. It is for the child.